My name is Lena Marie Lane. I'm 22 years old. And the day I gave my valedictorian speech wasn't the proudest day of my parents' lives, it was the day I made them wish they had paid attention sooner. The morning of my college graduation should have started with excitement. Hair curled just right, cap and gown laid neatly over the chair, a camera roll ready to capture hugs and handshakes. But for me? I sat at the edge of my twin-sized dorm bed, staring at 3 glaring empty chairs in the guest section of Columbia's grand auditorium. Chairs reserved for family. Mine stayed vacant like placeholders for promises never kept. They weren't running late. They weren't stuck in traffic. They were at a luxury spa retreat in Charleston, South Carolina, sipping cucumber water while I prepared to stand in front of 2,000 people as valedictorian. The irony? I had spent my whole life chasing that very title just to get noticed. You see, my family didn't come from poverty or neglect, not the kind that leaves physical scars. My wounds were invisible. And maybe that's what made them harder to survive. We lived in an upper-middle-class neighborhood where the hedges were trimmed, smiles were forced, and appearances mattered more than affection. My mom, Meredith, was a former fashion marketer. The kind of woman who believed perfection was just one serum away. My father, Richard, was a financial consultant who believed feelings were for inefficient people. And me? I was the firstborn. Which in our family meant the guinea pig, the babysitter, the background act. Everything changed when Olivia was born. 3 years younger, impossibly photogenic, and blessed with a kind of charisma you can't fake. She had blonde ringlets, lake blue eyes, and a natural flair for getting what she wanted. From the outside, we were the Lane girls, 2 halves of a perfect suburban dream. But while Olivia was celebrated like a young pageant queen, I was treated like her quiet handler. I was the one who got straight A's, made honor roll, and placed in national math competitions. But none of those moments earned a photo on the fridge. Not once. I still remember my 3rd grade science fair win. I ran home, cheeks pink with joy, clutching a gold certificate. My mom barely looked up from her phone. "Great job, sweetie. Just leave it on the counter." 10 minutes later, Olivia walked in with a drawing she'd doodled at school. Suddenly the room lit up. "Livy. That's adorable. I'm putting it on the fridge right now." I stood there, silent, still holding my certificate like it was a mistake I'd made. By middle school, I stopped expecting praise. My victories became internal. Every award I brought home was for me alone. I remember the time I was selected for a prestigious writing camp. Only 10 students in the entire state were chosen. I printed the acceptance letter and taped it to the fridge myself. A week later, Mom peeled it off. "Sorry, sweetie. We're going to Florida that week. Olivia's got scuba lessons. Can't miss those." I stayed home while they swam with dolphins. In high school, I placed in the top 1% nationwide on my SATs. I was the youngest in the school's debate team to qualify for nationals. Still, my parents barely batted an eye. "Just don't let your grades in gym drop too much," Dad said over breakfast one day. Meanwhile, Olivia got an A in English and suddenly she had a private tutor, a new journal, and a catered pizza party just to encourage her spirit. So, I did the only thing I could. I buried myself in achievement. I treated school like it was the only place I existed. Every lab experiment, every paper I wrote, every late-night cram session, I did it to prove I was worthy. Not to the world. Just to them. By the time I got to Columbia University, I had more academic honors than I could count. I was working as a TA my 2nd semester, double majoring in journalism and political science, and writing articles for student journals that professors passed around. But still, no phone calls. No "we're proud of you." Just the occasional thumbs-up emoji from Mom, and sometimes, nothing at all. The moment I received the valedictorian announcement, I felt something shatter and rise at once. I stared at the email for 10 whole minutes, then called home. I expected at least a flicker of excitement. Maybe this would finally be the thing. The achievement so large, so undeniable, that they couldn't ignore it. But all I got from my mom was, "Oh, that's nice. Valedictorian is the speech one, right?" I reminded her gently that I was the top student of my class. Out of thousands. That I'd be speaking at the graduation ceremony. I'll check the schedule. Olivia might have a work trip that week, and your dad's going with her. We'll see. They never saw. The day of graduation came. My phone was silent. No good luck text. No video call. Nothing. But that wasn't the worst part. While sitting backstage, seconds before I was to be called forward, I opened Instagram out of habit. My fingers froze. There, in a story posted by Olivia, was my entire family. Mom, Dad, and Livy clinking glasses at a spa, faces glowing under dim candlelight. The caption? All you need is family and a detox day. That night, I didn't just choose which speech to read. I chose which version of myself I was going to be from now on. And for the first time in my life, I didn't pick the quiet one. I stepped up to the podium, my hands ice cold even under the warm spotlight. The microphone hissed slightly as I adjusted it, and a low murmur of the crowd filled the air. Beyond the sea of navy gowns and fluttering programs, 3 empty chairs stood out like bruises in a field of flowers. I swallowed hard. My eyes searched for someone, anyone, who could anchor me in that moment. And then I found them. Celine, front row left, her red scarf standing out in the crowd like a promise. Leo next to her, a sunflower peeking awkwardly from the crook of his arm. Their presence gave me enough breath to start. I opened the folder and placed the second speech on the podium. Not the polished one I had rehearsed in front of the mirror. Not the script my advisor would have preferred. This one was handwritten, raw, and utterly mine. Good morning. My name is Lena Lane, and I'm honored to stand here as the valedictorian of the class of 2025. A wave of polite applause rolled through the auditorium, but I held up a hand gently, asking for quiet. Before I say anything else, I want to be honest. Not the kind of honesty that gets passed around in LinkedIn posts. The kind that makes people uncomfortable. Silence. I wasn't the girl anyone expected to see up here. I wasn't the favorite. I wasn't the one who got the loudest cheers at home. In fact, many times, I wasn't even seen at all. A soft rustle moved through the audience. Some parents sat up straighter. Some professors leaned in. I used to think love was something you earned. That if I just brought home enough straight A's, enough medals, enough published essays, someone would look at me and finally say, "Now you matter." But that day never came. There was a tightness in my throat. But I pushed through. Growing up, my sister Olivia was the light of every room. And I was the shadow holding the door. No one meant to hurt me, I think. But being overlooked again and again doesn't feel like an accident after a while. It feels like policy. Gasps. Soft murmurs. The press section scribbled faster. I don't share this to shame anyone. I share it for every person in this room who has ever felt invisible. Who worked so hard hoping someone, anyone, would clap. Now people were listening with their entire bodies. Faces leaned forward. Eyes widened. I could feel my voice growing steady. My parents aren't here today. They chose a spa day over my speech. I say that not with anger, but clarity. Because that's been the story of my life, excellence met with absence. I paused, staring directly into the live stream camera lens. But today, I am not speaking to fill their silence. I am speaking to claim my own voice. Applause broke out, scattered at first, then swelling until it rolled like thunder. I stood still, letting it wash over me, not to be celebrated, but to be heard. When I returned to my seat, my hands were trembling, not from fear, but from the weight I had just laid down after carrying it for 2 decades. After the ceremony, the usual chaos erupted: hugs, confetti, camera flashes. My classmates took selfies with their families. Proud moms held bouquets. Dads cried openly. Professors gave long-winded handshakes. Me? I stood under the banner that read "Congratulations, Class of 2025, with no one from my bloodline beside me. But I wasn't alone. Celine ran up first, throwing her arms around me. "You did it," she whispered. "And you said everything the world needed to hear." Leo handed me the bouquet. Sunflowers, my favorite. "The speech? That was journalism at its most powerful," he said. "You didn't just speak. You cut through generations." Later that night, back in my dorm, my phone lit up. First, a text from my mother. "You just shamed the whole family in front of the entire school." Then one from Dad. "Didn't expect you to destroy family ties for a few claps." Followed by one from Olivia. "Wow. Really? You had to air it all out in public like that?" "Mom's been crying for hours. And I'm the one getting calls from relatives. Hope you're happy." I wasn't happy. Not in the way they meant. But I was finally free. I didn't reply. I turned my phone face down. 3 hours later, a knock on the door changed everything. I opened it to find them standing there. Not my parents. Just Olivia. No sparkles. No red lipstick. Her jacket was wrinkled, her eyes swollen. "Mom says you burned every bridge," she muttered. "But I think you just lit your own path." She looked at me. Not like competition. Not like a sister coached to perform. But like someone seeing me for the first time. "I watched the live stream," she whispered. "In the car." I cried. "I'm sorry, I never asked what it felt like to be second." I stood motionless, heart pounding. "I never wanted to be first," she said. "It was a crown they forced on me." Her voice cracked. "You're the strongest person I know, Lena. And I want to know you again. From the start. If you'll let me." I opened the door wide. Not for her to escape blame. But for both of us to escape the roles our parents had forced on us. And that was the real beginning. We sat on the edge of my dorm bed, feet not touching the floor, two sisters who had been raised in the same house but lived entirely different childhoods. Olivia fiddled with the keychain on her purse, a little yarn doll I vaguely remembered her winning at a fair years ago. It was the first time in my life that silence between us wasn't heavy with competition or guilt. It just was. "I always thought you hated me," she said softly, eyes fixed on the frayed end of the doll. "Like deep down, can't stand the sight of me hate." I looked at her, really looked, and for the first time, I didn't see the perfect, pampered, pristine little sister. I saw someone just as trapped. "I didn't hate you," I said. "I hated how you were everything they wanted, and I was everything they tolerated." She blinked fast. "You know, whenever I messed up, even just a little, Mom would go ballistic. If I didn't win first, she'd ask what the second-place girl did differently. And Dad. Dad didn't even know what my major was until my junior year." I stared. "Wait. What?" She gave a crooked smile. "He once told a family friend I was studying something artistic. I'm a marketing major, Lena." The absurdity of it hit me. We laughed, really laughed, for the first time in years. The sound felt raw, uncertain, like limbs regaining circulation after being numb too long. Then she said something that changed everything. "After your speech, I went back and read your blog." My heart stopped. "You knew it was me?" Only someone invisible could describe what it felt like so well. We sat in silence. I'd written that blog to survive, to speak in a space where no one could interrupt me or sigh in disappointment. Never imagined Olivia would stumble upon it. Let alone understand it. I'm sorry I didn't stand up for you, she continued. So many times, I could have said something. But I was scared they'd stop treating me like the golden child if I spoke out. You were a kid, Liv, I replied. We both were. They put us on opposite ends of a scale and told us to keep balancing it. She nodded. But we don't have to stay on it. That night, we talked for hours. About birthdays that felt like obligations. About the constant pressure to smile for photos that told lies. About how sometimes being loved too much for the wrong reasons hurt just as deeply as being ignored. I showed her the notebook Leo gave me. The one where I'd written, if they don't show up today, I'll build tomorrows where I don't need them. She read the line 3 times, then quietly asked if she could take a picture of it. A week later, she emailed me a photo of her new apartment lease in Brooklyn. A studio with exposed brick and too much light. I want to be close, she said. Close, but on my own terms. In June, I moved to a small third-floor walk-up near Prospect Park. It had creaky wood floors and a slanted bookshelf that looked like it would collapse in a mild breeze. But it also had peace. For the first time in my life, I didn't feel like I had to justify why I deserved space. My job at the magazine started small, digital assistant to the editor-in-chief. I wrote headlines, fact-checked blurbs, formatted content for web. But within 2 months, I was asked to contribute a column. My first real piece. I thought about writing something flashy. Something impressive. But when I sat down, the words poured out of me like they'd been waiting for years. When you grow up in a house where mirrors don't reflect your worth, you start searching for your face in other people's reactions. The piece was titled, The Vanishing Daughter. It went live on a quiet Thursday afternoon. By Friday morning, it had over 2,000 shares. By Sunday, my inbox was flooded. You wrote what I've never been able to say. Thank you for showing me I'm not alone. I sent this to my sister. We haven't spoken in 5 years. I didn't reply to most of them. I didn't need to. Just reading them felt like being wrapped in a kind of invisible community, a tapestry of invisible kids who had finally found words for their silence. That weekend, I took a walk through the park, notebook in hand, and realized I wasn't writing to prove anything anymore. I was writing to be. Not the daughter. Not the valedictorian. Not even the writer. Just Lena. Later that month, a small box arrived at my door. No return label. No fancy envelope. Just a sticky note on top that read. Congratulations, Mom. Inside were homemade chocolate chip cookies. Burnt on the edges. Still warm in the center. It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't an apology. It was effort. And for once, that was enough. The next Saturday, I got an email from my dad. No subject line. Just one sentence. I'll be in Midtown at 2 p.m. Coffee, if you're willing. I stared at it for an hour. Then I forwarded it to my therapist. Dr. Monroe asked, if you go, what are you hoping to get? A reckoning? Closure? Or just a seat at the table? I thought about it for a long time. And then I said, I think I just want to be heard. I arrived at the cafe 10 minutes early. My hands were cold despite the summer heat, and I kept checking the clock on my phone, even though it hadn't moved. The place was small and tucked between a bookstore and a dry cleaner, quiet, with jazz playing softly over the speakers and the smell of espresso thick in the air. When I finally saw my father walk in, I didn't know what to feel. He was dressed in his usual charcoal gray blazer, crisp shirt, and polished shoes. Always looked ready for a business pitch, even on Saturdays. His eyes met mine, and for a second, he hesitated, as if unsure if I'd really be there. Then he gave a small nod and walked over. Lena, he said, voice neutral. Not warm, not cold. Just there. Hi, Dad. He sat down slowly, like the weight of the chair was heavier than it should have been. We ordered coffee. I didn't speak first. I waited. I read your essay, he said after a long pause. I kept my face still. The vanishing daughter? He nodded. Yes. It was hard to read. I gave a humorless smile. It was harder to live. He flinched. Just barely, but enough that I saw it. A crack in his otherwise impenetrable shell. I came here, he said slowly, not to defend myself. Just to listen. If you'll let me. That stunned me more than if he'd launched into a lecture. I leaned back and stared at the man who once said emotions were inefficient. Now he wanted to listen. I needed you to see me, I said. Not the daughter who checked every box or got a scholarship. Just me. I needed you to know that even as I succeeded, I was breaking. I didn't know, he said, almost to himself. Or maybe. I didn't want to know. I didn't respond. Letting him sit in the quiet was more honest than any sentence I could craft. He pulled something from his coat pocket and slid it across the table. A worn photo of me, 7 years old, on stage at the elementary school poetry recital. I was gripping a plastic microphone, my hair in crooked braids, a little crooked smile on my face. He flipped the photo over. On the back, in shaky handwriting, were the words. The day I thought you didn't need me anymore turned out to be the day I stopped trying. I didn't cry. But my throat burned like I had swallowed a scream. You were never unwanted, he added quickly, as if trying to erase years with one sentence. I just didn't know how to show it to someone who didn't demand it. I wasn't supposed to have to demand it, I said quietly. That's the point. We sat for a long time, the clatter of coffee cups and distant laughter surrounding us like static. When he left, we didn't hug. He just nodded again and said, if you ever want to talk more. I'll be here. I didn't promise anything. But I didn't say no. That was progress, I guess. Later that night, I emailed Leo the full transcript of my graduation speech, the version I had delivered. He called me 30 minutes later. You know what that was, he said. That was the sound of someone kicking down a door and lighting their own damn room. I laughed. A little dramatic. No. True. You didn't wait for recognition. You took your voice back. People felt that. The magazine offered me a permanent column the following week. Not just as a writer, but as an editor for a new initiative called Unspoken. A space for stories like mine. Like so many others. Stories of what happens when you grow up in polished homes that never see you. Of daughters overlooked, sons overpressured, expectations that crush instead of uplift. I said yes without hesitation. The first piece I accepted for publication was from a 19-year-old from Montana who wrote, "My dad came to my graduation, but he stared at his phone the entire time. I thought maybe if I threw my cap straight at his lap, he'd look up." I published it under the title, The Gaze That Never Lands. Olivia moved into her Brooklyn apartment that same month. She invited me over for takeout and wine on her first weekend. When I stepped inside, I froze. On the fridge, she had pinned 3 things. 1. My first published article. 2. A photo of us on the day of my graduation. 3. A post-it note that read, "Be the sister I needed back then." We didn't talk much about our parents after that. Not because we were avoiding the past, but because we were building something else. Something that didn't need approval. One Thursday afternoon, I found myself sitting at a cafe window, watching the rain streak down the glass. I was editing a new submission for the Unspoken column, a heartbreaking essay by a girl who had been told every day by her mom that she was too much. Leo walked in, kissed the top of my head, and handed me a box of pastries. "You're building something important," he said. "Not just a column. A revolution of quiet voices." I looked out at the street. And I realized something. I used to write to be seen. Now, I write to see others. And maybe, just maybe, that's what healing looks like. The column exploded faster than I expected. In just over a month, Unspoken went from a quiet experiment buried under the lifestyle tab to the most read section on the entire site. The comments poured in by the thousands, heartbreaking, raw, and painfully familiar. People were desperate to tell their truth. Not just because they wanted attention, but because they were tired of pretending it didn't happen. I remember editing a submission from a man in his 50s titled, "My mother only hugged me when I made varsity." Another came from a high school girl in Singapore who wrote, "I got accepted into 3 Ivy League schools. My dad's only text was, 'Nice. But did you apply to Stanford?'" Each essay felt like a reflection of my past, and a reminder that I was no longer alone. I was becoming something more than a daughter who had once been invisible. I was becoming a mirror for others. One Thursday morning, I got an unexpected email from Columbia's Dean of Student Affairs. She asked if I'd be willing to return to campus and speak during their fall symposium, an annual event focused on student mental health and personal resilience. I reread the email 3 times. Then texted Olivia. "Want to come back to where it all started?" Her response came instantly. "Front row. This time, I'll bring the flowers." I didn't tell our parents. Not out of spite, but because I had nothing left to prove. That evening, I pulled out the speech I gave on graduation day and reread the final line. "You don't need applause to be real. You just need to stop whispering your truth like it's a secret." I still remembered the moment I walked off that stage, how weightless I felt, like I'd just shed 22 years of silence. Now, I was walking back in, not as a student seeking praise, but as a woman grounded in truth. When the day arrived, the campus was draped in autumn colors, amber leaves, smoky skies, a breeze that felt like breath on your neck. I wore a cream blazer and a silver necklace Olivia had gifted me. She sat right up front, camera ready, eyes already glistening. I stepped onto the stage, heart steady, voice calm. I want to talk about the kind of pain that doesn't show up in childhood photos. The kind that exists between smiles, under clean report cards, behind rehearsed "we're proud of yous." I want to talk about the kind of love that's given only when you perform. And what happens when you stop performing. I told them about the spa day. About the missed birthdays. About Olivia's private confession that she, too, had been suffocating inside the spotlight I once envied. And I told them about something I hadn't spoken about publicly until then, how I used to fantasize about running away from every family gathering, every holiday photo, every dinner where my achievements were footnotes to my sister's outfits. But I didn't run, I said. I stayed. I observed. I wrote. And when the moment came, I didn't scream. I spoke. The audience went silent. I say this now to anyone here still waiting for a parent's approval like it's a monthly subscription you forgot to cancel. You are not a receipt for someone else's investment. You are a full person. With or without applause. By the time I stepped off the stage, I was crying. Not sobbing, but crying the kind of tears that leave you soft, unarmored, real. Olivia rushed up and hugged me so hard I almost dropped my notes. "You killed it," she whispered. "And you didn't even have to say my name for me to feel seen, too." That night, we had dinner at a tiny Indian restaurant near campus, the same place I used to pass by in college but never had time or money to eat at. We toasted with mango lassi and lamb curry. No one else joined us. No family. No long-lost cousins. Just the 2 of us. "I think Mom read your article," Olivia said between bites. She's been weirdly quiet. No rant texts. Just sending recipes. Even included a photo of Dad peeling carrots. I raised an eyebrow. "Progress?" Olivia shrugged. "Maybe. Maybe just guilt. But hey, at least the carrots are real." We laughed. Not to cover anything. But because we could now. Back at my apartment later that night, I found a small envelope wedged under my door. Inside was a check. Made out to my full name, Lena Marie Lane. The amount? $42,000. Memo line, tuition reparation. It was from my father. No note. No phone call. Just the check. I stared at it for an hour. Then I folded it carefully and placed it in a drawer. Not because I didn't need the money, but because I didn't need it to validate the pain. That part had already been paid in full, by years of silence. A week later, I used a portion of it to fund a writing workshop for first-gen college students who wanted to tell their stories. We called it Speak Anyway. And on the first day, as I walked into the room of wide-eyed writers holding notebooks like life rafts, I realized I wasn't chasing my parents' gaze anymore. I was building something so much bigger than their approval. A month after our writing workshop launched, I received an email that made me stop mid-sentence during an edit. The subject line read, "Request to feature your graduation speech in National Anthology." At first, I thought it was spam. But it wasn't. It was real, an editor from a major publishing house curating a collection titled Voices They Tried to Silence. She'd found my speech through the unspoken column, read the original transcript, and wanted to include it in print and censored, unchanged. I didn't hesitate. The day I signed the licensing agreement, I called Olivia. "Guess what?" I said, barely containing my voice. "That speech? It's going to be in a book. In libraries. In classrooms." I could hear her grin through the phone. Damn right it is. It was a small victory on paper, but a seismic shift in my life. For years, I'd believed that if I said anything too raw, too real, I'd lose whatever scraps of love I still had. But now, every time someone read that speech, they didn't run from it, they ran toward it. They shared it. They felt it. My therapist, Dr. Monroe, once told me, when the truth is finally spoken, you stop being haunted by silence. And she was right. Because one morning, while walking through Prospect Park with coffee in hand, I realized I hadn't felt that ache in my chest, the one that used to whisper "you're still not enough," in weeks. Olivia kept coming to the Thursday cafe meetups. Sometimes we'd talk about our parents. Sometimes we wouldn't. And that was okay. We were slowly untangling a knot that took a lifetime to form. Gently. Respectfully. Without bleeding on each other anymore. One Thursday, she handed me a sealed envelope. "It's from Mom," she said. "She gave it to me last weekend. Asked me to wait before passing it on." I stared at it like it might catch fire. Then I opened it. It wasn't long. Just a letter written in her neat, slanted script, the same handwriting I used to forge when signing field trip slips. "Dear Lena, I watched your graduation speech from my phone in the hotel spa lounge. I told myself we deserved that weekend. But watching you up there, I saw every moment I missed. You looked like a woman I didn't raise, but should've. I'm sorry I didn't see you sooner. I'm sorry I only knew how to love what I understood, and you were always a little too strong, too distant, too much like who I wish I'd been. I don't expect forgiveness. I just hope that when you're ready, we can sit at the same table again, not as mother and daughter trying to fix the past, but as two people brave enough to say, we both got it wrong. Love. Mom." I didn't cry. I folded the letter, tucked it into my journal, and wrote beneath it. Even an imperfect apology can soften a wall. Weeks later, I was invited to speak at a leadership conference in D.C., a panel titled "The Weight of Being the Good Child." I stood alongside other professionals who'd once been dismissed, belittled, or ignored for being too ambitious or too emotional or not the golden one. The room was packed. One woman clutched my hand afterward and whispered, "You saved my daughter and didn't even know it." That night, I walked alone by the Washington Monument, the white spire glowing under a velvet sky, and I made myself a promise. I would never again dim my light just to make someone else's comfort zone feel cozy. It was spring when I returned to Charleston. My first time back in nearly 2 years. Not for a holiday. Not for a family emergency. But because Olivia asked me to come. I'm hosting a gallery showcase, she said. It's small. Local. But I want you there. The event was in a renovated art space downtown. Exposed brick, soft music, wine in plastic cups. Her PR firm had helped sponsor an exhibit on young Southern creatives. She introduced me as my big sister, my biggest inspiration, and for the first time, I didn't flinch at the word sister. Afterward, we sat outside on the curb, heels kicked off, eating tacos from a street vendor. Olivia leaned her head on my shoulder. You made it out, Lena. You really did. I smiled. You're not so bad at escaping either. Later that night, I passed by my childhood home. I didn't go inside. I didn't need to. The porch light was still on. The hedges still trimmed. The silence still hanging in the air. But I didn't feel haunted. I stood there for 1 minute. Long enough to say goodbye. Then I turned and walked away. Back in Brooklyn, I added a new quote to the header of the unspoken column page. We are not what they forgot to love. We are what we learned to love despite it. It went viral. I still see my parents sometimes. Usually brief. Often awkward. But civil. Dad has stopped calling me overly sensitive. Mom doesn't bring up Olivia in every conversation. And when they do slip into old patterns, I know how to leave without guilt. The greatest revenge, I've learned, isn't silence or retaliation. It's building a life where your worth isn't up for debate. I've written 2 books now. The first was about growing up in shadows. The second? About building light of your own. Olivia designed the cover. Leo proposed under the maple tree that sits outside my apartment window, the same one I stared at while writing my very first post on invisibility. We're getting married next fall. Not in Charleston. But in New York. At the very campus where my story started, with an empty chair and a full heart. This time, there will be no spa days. No excuses. Just chosen family, real vows, and a room filled with people who never made me prove I mattered. And as I walk down that aisle, I will remember the girl who stood on a stage alone and spoke the truth, not to shame, but to free herself. This is her victory. And mine. Thank you for watching Revenge Echoes. Remember, the loudest voices aren't always the truest. Sometimes the most powerful story is the one you were never allowed to tell. If Lena's journey spoke to something inside you, let us know in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe for more stories of triumph, truth, and transformation.